Welcome to Chapter 1, Introduction to the Real Estate Business. In Chapter 1, they talk about the real estate business being a big business, and then they talk about it, all the different aspects of it. And it's interesting, and you can read it all through. I don't think there's anything here that's really terribly important for you to really have to memorize and read all the way through. But I think it's good for you to know that there are these different specialties within the real estate business. And perhaps, you might find that if brokerage isn't something you want to do, perhaps property management is. And perhaps if those aren't something you want to do, maybe you'd like to become an educator. You've got a good background. Or perhaps you might go into home inspection or maybe auctioning. So always think in terms of the real estate business as having many different facets to it. And your big challenge is to really try to find the area of the business that you think you're going to like and that your skills and your background work well in. The big deal about these my lectures too is you'll notice at the top we've got page 2. What I try to do on each of my screens is I try to give you the page number that I'm on. So this should keep you on track and you won't get lost with me. So kind of watch for the page number. Occasionally I'll give you extra stuff that isn't in your book, in which case I'll say extra stuff not in your book, so you're not looking all over for it. As far as the real estate business, then, these areas of specialization, what you should know is that these are the ones with red stars that I'm going to show you now need to have a license. So if you're in the brokerage business, you have to have a license. And in Illinois, there are 3 licenses. There's a broker-manager license, there's a broker's license, and there's a residential leasing agent license. Those are the 3 licenses that are offered in Illinois, and depending what you do in the business, you will require one of those 3 licenses. We'll talk more about those later. Appraisers, as we study the chapter in appraising, we're going to find out that appraisers have to be licensed in Illinois. Separate appraisal licenses, 3 different ranks. One is the appraisal trainee, just the beginner, if you will. The certified residential, a rank up dealing only with residential property, and then there's the certified general rank, which means you can deal with appraised commercial property. We'll talk more about those with our appraisal chapter later in the course. Property management, if you're going to be in the property management business or you're going to work for a property manager, you will need to be licensed. Financing, I put a gray box for. In fact, there is a license now in the financing area. It's called the Mortgage Loan Originator License. But most of the people in the financing business, people that work for banks and other governmental agencies involved with financing, don't have to be licensed. So give that half a red star, I suppose. We'll talk about financing in another chapter. Subdivision and development, don't need a license there. Home inspection, we do need a license. It's not a real estate license, it's a home inspection license. Counseling, we don't need a license. But education, we do. Again, not a real estate license, but a real estate educator's license. And then auctioning does need a real estate auctioning license. So there is an auctioning license for auctioneers. Most auctioneers are licensed as real estate brokers as well as having an auctioning license. So those are some of the categories of the business, and many of them, as you can see, require some sort of licensing. The real estate business, besides being a business, is broken up into types of properties within those areas of the specialization. And most of you would be familiar with these things. There's the residential types of properties. There's retail, office, industrial, land, agricultural, special purpose, and I suppose there are even additional types of real property. But the idea here on page 5 is just that you know that besides being a big business, it's further divided by the types of property within those areas of specialty. So you can be a residential property manager, you can be a residential appraiser, you can be a retail property manager, you can be a commercial appraiser, you can be an office broker, you can be a retail broker, you can be an industrial leasing agent rep, you can be a residential leasing agent rep. So each of those specializations has within it these types of real property categories. You might want to, be familiar with that. What's the difference between residential and commercial property? Residential property is considered single-family units less than 4. And anything more than 4, if you will, 5 or more units, and certainly the industrial, the warehouses, the office, obviously that's all commercial, isn't it? So single-family, the single-family unit, the condos, the single-family homes, and the small multi-family 1 to 4 units are considered residential. And that's important because there are laws that affect, quote, residential property, and therefore they don't affect commercial property. So when we classify something as residential property, there'll be certain laws that affect it. And again, this is 1 to 4 units. Let's examine quickly supply and demand forces. It's important for you to know in your market area what's happening with the supply and the demand for real estate, because this is going to affect price. And in order to effectively and professionally consult with your sellers and your buyers and give them good advice, you have to know what's going on with price. Therefore, you have to know what's going on with supply and demand in your market area. Typically, price follows demand, which means as demand increases, so do prices. And as demand decreases, so do prices. Look at some supply factors. The biggest supply factor I think you should be aware of is labor forces. As we have fewer skilled people to build properties, maybe they've all left for the big building out in Las Vegas many years ago. A lot of local areas couldn't get people to build because they'd all moved to Las Vegas. There was so much building going on out there, so the labor force to build fell down. Construction costs are also important supply factors, and governmental controls, financial policies. All of those affect the supply or the cost of creating, building a property. And since they affect the supply, if it affects the supply negatively, and as I said, labor force is a big one, if the supply goes down, okay, price will go up. If the supply goes up, price goes down. The demand factor, page 7 gives you a number of them, and read them all through, but the big one is population. As population increases, demand increases. Well, if demand increases, prices go up. If population falls off, demand goes down, price goes down. Okay, I think we've completed chapter 1, and hopefully with a good reading of that and all the other tools that we've provided for you, you'll be successful when you take the quiz for chapter 1 that we're going to give you. As I say, the only rule with the quizzes in your quiz packet that we're giving you is no peeking. Make sure you take it just like you would a legitimate exam, and then go back and grade it. Getting something wrong isn't necessarily bad. It's actually good. If you get something wrong, that tells us that's something we need to learn, and let's go learn it. So we really are looking, when we take these quizzes, not so much what we get right. We get it right, that's great, but we're trying to find out what we got wrong. That's something that we can work with, and that's something we can learn, and that's something that helps us be stronger when we go to sit for the state examination. If you want to take the Chapter 1 textbook questions, that's found at the end of Chapter 1 on page 9, you can do that. And the answers for the textbook chapter questions, end of chapter questions in the textbook, are found on page 575. So if you like drilling and you like taking quizzes, a lot of people do. A lot of people learn by simply drilling, and then going back and missing questions and looking up the answers. That's a way to learn too. So if you're someone who likes to drill and see how well they're doing and find out what you do and don't know by doing that sort of evaluation, that sort of follow-up, if you will, then you're welcome to do that. So the chapter textbook questions are optional. I prefer you do the quiz chapters, however, that I'm giving you. So good luck with you, and we'll see you on chapter 2.